Welcome to the 7th episode of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with holistic detox counselor and colon hydrotherapist Michael Perrine. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom from rigid diets, painful body image, and never-ending cycles of self-help and self-improvement. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Hey friends, here we go again. Today I'm talking with Michael Perrine of the fabulous podcast Everyday Detox. And if you'll recall a couple episodes back, I spoke with another colonic guy, Gil Jacobs, and you're probably thinking at this point, what is with this girl and poop? And that would be a valid question. And all I'll say is that when something changes your life, you share it. That has been true for me with kundalini yoga, intuitive eating, self-love, and cleansing my body in what might seem like an unconventional way. That said, the way I approached healing a lifetime of binge eating was also unconventional. So rather than willpower and control, which mind you, I did try for years, I finally found freedom in the surrender of rules and in slowing down and in self-exploration. And rather than continuing to promise myself that I was never going to binge eat again, which clearly didn't work, it's funny. I say clearly, but for so many years it wasn't clear. It was like over and over again, I'd be like, this is the last time I'm going to do this. So finally, eventually, rather than continuing to promise myself that this was it, I started sitting down with those binges and really exploring who I was in those moments, and it changed everything. So all of that to say, don't be afraid of unconventional. And with that said, don't even be afraid of what might appear to be unnatural. And something that we talk about in this conversation is how unnatural practices like, let's say, juicing or cleaning the colon are just a response to the unnatural way humans are living today, and how what may seem extreme, if it's embraced with a gentleness and a curiosity, will only serve to balance the extremely unnatural, unwell state that most of us are living in today. What's natural is wellness. Wellness is natural. Have you heard that story about the guy who's, I don't know if I'm going to tell this right, but I'm pretty sure it's something like this guy is like banging his head against the wall and he goes to the doctor and he says, I have a headache. And the doctor tells him, like, stop banging your head against the wall. And actually, now that I think about it, a lot of doctors would probably have just given him a prescription for the headache, but the sane response would be to look at the cause. We become more free when we don't have a massive blockage in the way of our expression. And that blockage could be beliefs about ourselves that aren't true or traumas that we suffered. And the body is also more free when its natural state isn't blocked. And that is the heart of what we'll talk about today. So back to Mike. Today, we'll talk about his first colonic with Gil Jacobs of podcast number 5. And that was in 2002, the colonic, not the podcast. How Mike went from drinking and smoking 2 packs of cigarettes every day and being 50 pounds heavier than he is now to the incredible level of wellness he lives with today. The book he read one day when he stayed home to recover from drinking that ended up changing his life. How he got into eating a plant-based diet and why he wouldn't stick with it if it were miserable the way that some people assume it would be. How heavily processed foods light up the same pleasure centers in our brains as drugs, why colon cleansing in and of itself isn't that useful, and how it can, even like all things, be turned into a tool for disorder, the magic of cryotherapy, embracing what's unnatural in response to unnatural living, rebellion that serves you versus rebellion that hurts, the concept of clean eating and what it actually means, meaning that it's not a moral thing where we're like, oh, I was so good today, or I was so bad today, gotta get back on the wagon. It's so far beyond that. And to give you a taste of what you're about to go into, one of my favorite quotes from Mike in this conversation is, an apple a day keeps the doctor away because it makes you shit. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Michael Perrine. colon hydrotherapist or colonic therapist. I've heard you say colonic therapist. Is there the perfect term for it or a right term for it?
No, it's one of those things that has many names. It's like the colon or the bowel or the large intestine. It's all pretty much the same thing. So
okay.
Colon hydrotherapy, colonic therapist, it's the same thing.
Okay. That's a really weird job.
It's a super weird job, and it's not a job that I ever thought that I would have. If you would have told me when I was like 19 years old.
Yeah.
That?
You didn't grow up dreaming of cleaning people's colons.
No, there was no, booth at the job fair for that one. No, I got into colon hydrotherapy because I met Gil Jacobs, and it's interesting. I forgot. I was just looking through some files on my computer. I forgot the exact date, but it was March something, 2002, when I had my first colonic with Gil. And I just happened to come across that on a calendar. I was going through some computer files, and I was like, oh yes, I've been getting them since 2002, and I've been practicing since shortly after. Probably the same year, 2002, I think, or 3. But yeah, I was inspired to do that work from working with him, and also observing people in the waiting room and watching tremendous lifestyle changes and healings happen over time. I was there originally because my ex had constipation issues, and I used to just accompany her to her colonics, and I was just kind of open-minded and curious, and I was like, what is this? What is this about? And it turned out it was a very integral part of the raw food movement as well. And it was an integral part of, deep tissue cleansing and detoxification. And I learned that later, and it helped me tremendously. So I was moved to do the work.
So you mentioned, thinking about back when you were 19, you couldn't imagine this being your life path. Where were you at 19? Give me all the details, starting from, your young adult life to discovering raw foods or vegetarianism, colon hydrotherapy, deciding you wanted to do this. Give me the ins and outs up until now.
Well, and 19 was actually the turning point for me. That was the point where I sort of had this, I don't know what to call it. I'll just call it like a spiritual awakening. So my teenage years, I was experiencing anxiety. I have an anxiety disorder that runs in my family. So I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And I was just coming of age, where we started experimenting with all sorts of substances and alcohol. And I started using alcohol to medicate the anxiety. And I grew up in a place called Staten Island. It's actually the same place that Gil is from as well. We went to the same high school, but 20 years apart. Yeah. It's interesting. Staten Island, it's famous for Guidos, and it's famous for colon hydrotherapists because myself, Gil, Tom DeVito, who works with me at Vitality, he's from Staten Island, and Dr. Fred Bitchie is from Staten Island, who's a clinical nutritionist and raw foodist. I was fascinated by why everybody else was like super interested in this culture, the Jersey Shore and like this Guido. Everybody interested in this. Like, this is old news because I grew up with it, but I didn't realize that it was specific to Staten Island and Long Island and Brooklyn and some of the other outlying areas, But I guess the Jersey Shore, that MTV show, was the first time people had seen that. So, But Staten Island's known for Guidos, and it's known for colonic therapists because Gil is also from Staten Island. Tom DeVito, who works with me at Vitality, is from Staten Island. Dr. Fred Bitchie, who's not a colonic therapist, but he's into detoxification and raw food nutrition. He's a clinical nutritionist. He's from Staten Island. So it's just an interesting mix of exposures I had when I was out there.
Okay, so all of these colon hydrotherapists coming out of Staten Island, how did you end up connecting with them? Actually, no. Like, what was your lifestyle like back then? So spiritual awakening from what?
Well, I was in a very dark place. I was very confused. I had completely collapsed my body with just really terrible food choices, terrible substance choices. I was drinking every day for a good 3 to 4 years. I was smoking cigarettes, 1 to 2 packs a day for a number of years. So by the age of 19, my body was pretty shot. I should have been at my prime, and I was at my worst. I was about 50 pounds heavier than I am now. It was in all the wrong places. So it wasn't like I was 18 and I had like a really good physique, and I was, had 25, 35 pounds of muscle on me. It was just all the wrong spots. I wasn't terribly overweight. There's before and after pictures that I have on some of my podcasts that you can see. The results are, the comparison is pretty dramatic. So what happened is one night I was sort of in a dark place. I was in bad health, and I used to drink so much that on certain nights I would just kind of rest and recover. Like I couldn't go out and party and do those things. So I would just kind of hang around and read books and watch television. This was all pre-internet and phones and all that stuff. And I wandered down into my parents' basement one night, and I was looking through these old books that they had from, I guess, their college years or something. And I found the original printing of the Autobiography of Malcolm X. And I don't know what it was, but I picked it up and I looked at it, and it was very intimidating because it was like this original printing, and it was very small print, and it was a pretty dense book for me at that time. And I said, I'm going to read this. And I read that book cover to cover, and it just completely opened my mind and changed my life. And I started to model Malcolm X. And I just figured, I was probably 18 or just turning 19. And I was like, okay, Malcolm's got his shit together. He knows what he's doing. I'm just going to do everything he does. So, so I stopped drinking, stopped smoking. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but these are very challenging things for me to do and to overcome. But I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking. I started studying. I stopped eating pork. I had no interest in becoming Muslim. It's just that's what Malcolm was doing, and I was modeling him. So I was like, maybe pork's not a good idea. And you kind of knew something about cholesterol, and I didn't really know anything about health. And I started studying everything I could about nutrition. And I went to a health food store. There was a store that's now closed. It's very sad for me that it's closed because I had very tremendous experiences there, and just a very foundational developmental time for me, walking through health food stores, reading books. So it's kind of sad that this place closed. But I went to a health food store to buy soy milk, and I didn't know anything about nutrition. I just knew that soy milk didn't have cholesterol, and that was a good thing. So I should go buy that. So I went to go buy some soy milk, and I don't really recommend soy milk now to my clients, but I went to go do that. And I saw a book that had been recommended by some friends, and I'd heard of it. And it was called Diet for a New America. It was written by a guy named John Robbins. He was the heir of the Baskin-Robbins ice cream company. His father and his uncle started that company. And he sort of had his own revelation many years before me. He's older than I am. And he ended up doing all this research about, dairy and animal food and this stuff, and compiled it into this book. And in the early days, this was sort of the vegetarian Bible. And I started reading this book, and my mind was blown. I mean, I was at the exact age, I was at college age where my mind was open, and I was very idealistic, and I really was hungry for knowledge. And it was the first time I'd ever heard about the way animals were treated poorly. It was the first time I'd ever heard about pesticides being used on food and accumulating in the fats and down the food chain. The first time I had ever heard about the correlation between disease and diet. I just never knew any of these things. So my mind was like blown, and I was just like all in. And within 3 days, I was full on vegan. And that was 24 years ago, I think. I was 19. That was 24 years ago. And I've been vegan ever since. And it's taken a lot of different shapes and forms over that time. And in the early days, when I first started, I lost about 60 pounds in 3 months. And so it was very dramatic. My body went into a very deep state of detoxification and changeover, partially because I was young and it was just able to do that very quickly. And partially because it was so dramatic what I did. Like I completely went off of all substances and took out all of these offending substances and went right into deep cleansing foods. And like I was eating tofu and oat muffins and that kind of stuff and bagels, but it was just still such a dramatic effect going from like a diet of garbage to a diet of more or less of whole foods with no substances. And I detoxed hard. Like I was getting high fevers. I had stuff coming out of my skin. I was tired all the time. I lost weight very quickly. So, of course, everybody thought that I was like killing myself because in 1995 or 90, when it was 95, like everybody thought if you ate vegan for a week, you were going to die. It wasn't like today. So I remembered a nutritionist that was brought up by one of my high school teachers. And I remember that he advocated vegetarianism. And I also remember that one of my best friends, his father, used to go to this nutritionist. And that was Dr. Fred Bishie. He's going to be 89, I think, this year, 88 or 89 this year. And I think his birthday just passed. He's 88 or 89 now. And I went to him as a client when I was 19 years old. And I didn't know that he was a raw foodist. I just knew that he advocated vegetarianism. And I went to him, and he refined my diet a little more, and he kind of guided me through these cleanses, and it was great. And I was his client, and then we became friends, and then we became colleagues years later. And now he works at Vitality at my studio in New York. So that was,
That's
he works with us now. Yeah, because he's moving. He's kind of like pulling away from the city a little bit. So, he uses our office to have still have a location in Manhattan. So, so that was a fantastic relationship that I've had for a long time, and he's been a mentor to me and a friend to me. And so that's how I got into this. Oh, and so getting into colon hydrotherapy, I also didn't know anything about colonics. And when I was going through all that, I didn't really know that helping the body with elimination was something to even be done. I was like 19, 20, 21, the first few years. I didn't know about that. I just knew like you eat well and your body takes care of the rest. And for me, luckily, I was 19 years old when I started, so my body was able to take care of the rest pretty well. Although I could have, I mentioned those high fevers and skin issues and exhaustion and all that. Like I could have definitely benefited from some deep tissue cleansing in the way of colonics and saunas and other things. But I didn't have the knowledge. And it wasn't until years later when the raw food movement, so I guess now we're talking 1999, the raw food movement became very popular and exploded. And the raw food movement kind of exploded around 99, 2000. I think it peaked around 2002, 3, something like that. And then it started to like decline a little bit over the years. And now it's like declined a bit, and I'm not sure why, but just as far as the enthusiasm and interest from people. So when that was really at its peak, like everybody was going hardcore, and I didn't even know that raw food was a thing. So I was like, wait, I can take this vegan diet to like raw food. It actually didn't make any sense to me. I was like, this diet doesn't make any sense to me. I was like, you can't eat all your food raw. I was like, you can't get all your nutrients. Like I really had to work it out in my head. I used to eat probably 50 to 65, 70% raw food when I was eating just normal vegan. But now going 100%, I was like, wow. So when I got into that, and a lot of people were getting into that, they were going into these deep radical cleansing crises. And that's when I met Gil, and he was explaining to me, he's like, health has more to do with elimination than it does what you put in. So he's like, you can read about all these things, like all these superfoods and all this. And he's like, they might have great nutrient content. He's like, that's true. He's like, but if your body's in a state of trying to release deep waste and break your tissue down and rebuild itself, he's like, not everybody has the strength to get through that process smoothly. And when you start to open up the channels of elimination through sweating and through, especially from emptying the core of the body and relieving the weight of the waste and the pressure of the gas away from the core and doing it repetitiously during certain periods, it's like you can remove a lot of those symptoms and take that load off of your body. And once I started doing that, I was like, whoa. And then I experienced tremendous personal gain from that and benefit. And then I just observed so many people getting benefits from in the waiting room. And we all worked at a place called Chakra 17. So Tom DeVito, who I mentioned, worked there. Joyce Spindell worked there. And Gil worked there, and a bunch of other people as well. And so we all worked at this place, and it was like just like a circus because Gil's very eccentric. Yes. And we had like a portrait of Arnold Ehret on the wall. And,
amazing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, experiencing tremendous benefit from this, which obviously you would have to, or you wouldn't be bothering to live on, mostly raw foods and do this colon hydrotherapy thing. And I've heard you say that, if you had to live your life craving pizza, you wouldn't do this. Like if it was this awful thing with all of this terrible discipline, it wouldn't be worth it. But you don't. Like there's a degree of ease, obviously. And so tell me, like, what is the personal benefit that you've experienced? How is the feeling in your body, in your skin, different from how you felt when you were 19?
Oh, well, I mean, I have so much more energy than I did then. My weight is lower then. My skin is clearer. I think more clearly than I did when I was younger. I live more on purpose and direction now that I'm more my body's more in alignment with nature. Not so much into processed foods, not so much into blurring my consciousness. Because even food can do that, but I mean more with alcohol and things like that. And this is all to a matter of degree, but not using food to, what's the phrase I'll use? sort of alter my emotional state, or to appease my emotional state. I mean, I still do it. I get hungry and I want to eat something, and but there, I remember doing it with cigarettes and food and things. It's like, I don't know what to do next to myself. I'm feeling anxiety, or I'm feeling sadness, or I'm feeling whatever the thing is I'm feeling. So let me have a cigarette and distract myself and go eat this thing. And then that'll light up the chemistry in my brain to make me feel good. And, like that, I live in the absence of all of that now.
Mm-hmm. Was that a challenging? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you had mentioned something that I had said, you must have heard me say it somewhere, about if I crave pizza all the time, like I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I think it was on one of the Beck Slave podcasts.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons people use words like strict vegan diet or discipline and things like that is because, in a lot of ways, we're addicted to a lot of the modern foods that we have. Sure. They light up the same pleasure centers in the brain that some drugs do. So consistency is really important. There's like tribes of people somewhere, some indigenous culture that's not, craving, Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. And the reason they don't crave it is not because it's not tasty. It's because they've never experienced it and they've never had a taste of it. So they don't have to walk around wanting that thing.
And I'm going to build on that. I'm sorry. Finish your sentence or finish your thought.
Oh, I was just going to say, once we clean our chemistry of that and we're consistent and we don't dabble, we don't throw that back into the chemistry, and we completely erase the residue of that from our body, and we completely erase the memory of that, we don't crave it. We crave different things, and our body will start to look for those other things that meet those needs. So, like I crave a big salad every night. Like I really do. Like that's all I want to eat. And like other people think that's insane, that they would go nuts, and like in the early days,
in the early days. And I think that people don't realize, like, it really scares them to think that they wouldn't want or crave or need those foods, because when you feel like you need them, it feels like you'll die without them, or that life would be miserable without them. It's a hard thing to imagine.
Yeah, I see these things on my comments on YouTube on my podcast sometimes, and people just say things like, the spice of life is food, or this, like there's all these cute little poetic things they put around it. And it's like, yes, that's true, but let's look at it for what it is,
Right. Or even this idea of freedom, because you could have said it, at 18 years old, like, I'm free. I do whatever the fuck I want. I smoke, I drink, I eat, like nobody can tell me what to do. And, obviously I'm just putting words in your mouth, but essentially people could think that, like, I'm free when I can do whatever I want to do or eat whatever I want to eat. But are you free when you feel trapped in your body or trapped by every little craving? Is that really freedom?
Right. That's the modern thing that we got ourselves in some trouble with farming and agriculture. I mean, we have this part of our brain that craves sugar, it craves salt, it craves fat. It's what keeps us looking for stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. And then we mastered the world and we started farming, and we have everything we want whenever we want it. We made everything sweeter and bigger and fattier, and now we can't control it. So now we're kind of at the mercy of that, because we're raised up in that culture. And we're immediately addicted to that food from the moment we're addicted to it because that's what mom eats when we're developing inside of mom. And then we come out and immediately that's what we get. We get that. Even some baby formulas, if somebody's not breastfeeding for some reason, the baby formula is like oil emulsified with sugar, and they put all the vitamins and all that stuff in there, the synthetic stuff. But like the first thing you're doing is you're getting fat and sugar, and it's not in a natural form. So like, we really like that stuff. Another thing is our gut microbiome. Our microbiome, the bacteria in our intestine will actually tell us what to eat. So, if we're eating something consistently, the microbiome is set up to want that food, and it's going to pull your mind. It's going to make you start to crave that food, which is fascinating, because then it's like, who really wants it?
Right.
Like, this is all new science. If you hear weird noises, that's my puppy in the background.
Oh, yeah, fine. So how can you learn to be consistent, or like when you're working with your clients, how do you get them to be consistent without getting into a really perfectionistic mindset? And I'll give you a little background. So my work is in eating psychology, and I work with a lot of women who struggle with binge eating and emotional eating, and like really wanting to eat to feel good, but just sort of doing this back and forth thing. And if they they're doing really good on their diet, but if they eat one thing they consider bad, they just go absolutely crazy. Like it's all or nothing, it's black or white. And this is where I was for most of my life, really. I discovered Natalia Rose's work when I was about, this is maybe 10 years ago, and just dove right in. It was absolutely life-changing. So for anybody listening, very similar to Mike's work, heavy raw foods, food combining and all of the stuff that you're into, and colon hydrotherapy. And I was very, very serious about it, but I had such emotional eating issues and was so very black and white about things. And I would go very, very extreme. So I was doing juice fasts that were anywhere from 70 days to 90 days. But then once I was done, I was right back to the binge eating. And even if it was just binge eating on nuts or binge eating on carrots, it was still, I was numbing and I was zoning out. And for me, it wasn't until I just sort of let everything go and let go of the rules and let go of the perfectionism that I sort of naturally found my way back to this, because this is what felt good. And it was no longer something about the way that I looked or being perfect or being black and white. It was really just about, eating whatever I want doesn't actually feel good. It isn't actually freedom. And I found a consistency from a sort of back end, but simply because it felt better than non-consistency, or it felt better than craving these things all the time. So what is your take on that, on consistency, but not crazy perfectionism?
Yeah, the first thing, this is for people really just getting into it and wanting to eat better. I always say, make sure you're prepared. Because I'm a colon hydrotherapist, and I do a lot of what we call disaster management. Mm. So, it's like people fall down a lot, So I'm like, okay, you're going to fall down. Now, did you have those whole grain cookies in your freezer, or those raw food ice cream in your freezer, or no? What happened? Okay, it was midnight and none of those places were open. So you're getting Haagen-Dazs and now you're all constipated and feeling gross and gassy and, hating yourself or whatever. I'm like, at least if you're going to eat a whole bunch of sugar and fat, be prepared. Have the healthier stuff that your body's not going to have to recover from as dramatically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got to set it up. And some of it just comes down to facing it and retraining your body and really working with the microbiome to crave different things. Mm. So, cleaning out all the old shit from the colon, eating a lot of broom foods, and eating raw fermented vegetables. Mm. That's going to help reset that microbiome, so you're not going to go into that spiral of food craving.
Mm-hmm. Right, because that gets tricky when people want to listen to their bodies, because that's a big thing. Intuitive eating, listen to your body, and I will say that too. However, it has to be a much bigger picture. Like, listen to your body, but don't necessarily follow everything. Like, listen to the big picture. If you listen to your body and you're craving Haagen-Dazs, let's say, and then you feel like shit after the Haagen-Dazs, you've got to listen to that whole picture.
Yeah, yeah. We get into this thing where we start to tell this story with the listen to your body thing, where we justify like, well, my body needed it. My body was telling me I needed like fat or something, so I had to eat the thing, right. And it's like, maybe that wasn't it, because if I listened to my body in the first 5 years that I was starting to eat clean, I would have eaten Doritos every day, because my body was telling me to eat a Dorito because I was having food cravings, but it wasn't really my body. Mm-hmm. So it can be a little confusing for people.
Right.
But yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, sometimes it's just facing that thing, and recognizing what it is and going like, okay, this, I just need to exercise some discipline and make a cup of herbal tea right now and be okay being hungry and just be the experiencer of what's going on instead of immediately having to go in and fix my situation. Because then it goes away.
Right. And that's scary for people to think. I was thinking this the first time you mentioned it's more about what you leave out, or it's more about elimination than anything else. And I absolutely agree, but that really scares people.
It does.
Do you work with many people? Do many people come to Vitality that that struggle with emotional eating or binge eating?
Yeah, some of them do. Definitely.
And how do you work with that? Is it just be prepared? What else do you have for them?
It's all coaching, because it comes down to what they do. It's like any addictive situation. You know what I mean? It's like you can set someone up, you give them the right pep talk, you tell them exactly what to eat. You try to work with them on like working on the gut, the microbiome, and creating healthy habits. But the moment they drop that thing back in, they open up the whole new cycle of craving. So it's a lot of coaching. It's a lot of back and forth, because that kind of work really only happens, that change really only happens with the person. Because they're in full control of everything. They're in charge. They're the one that's in charge.
Right. You can't make anybody do anything.
No. Yeah. So so you can be inspirational. You can give tips and advice. You can help clean up the mess. And then they're on their way. And sometimes if we're cleaning up messes too much, sometimes we have to tell people that they can't be our clients anymore. I've had to do that with people that try to use colon hydrotherapy as an eating disorder. So when people come in, if their frequency is at there's certain levels of frequency for different things. Like if I see on the schedule that someone's coming in like 3 or 4 times in a week, I'm like, all right, what cleanse is that person on? And if they're not on one, then why are we coming 3 or 4 times a week? And I need to know, and I want to figure it out and either stop it or encourage it, depending on what they're trying to do. Because sometimes people do need a lot of colonics for different reasons. I mean, we work with people through bowel issues, and repetitious colonics can heal them. Sometimes people are detoxing. Repetitious colonics are phenomenal at helping, take the load off. And then sometimes people are using them for reasons other than therapeutic reasons. And we got to keep our eye on that as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely very familiar with that. I think the first huge chunk of years, I used colon hydrotherapy, the whole overeating, overtreating. I would overeat, and the next day I would do a colonic, and in my mind, just suck it all out. And that was how I spent a lot of my time. And it can definitely go that way. And it's really interesting. You could have, I feel like, 2 people side by side who on the outside are doing just very similar things, eating something of a raw food diet, doing colon hydrotherapy, and one person could be completely healthy and completely sane and completely grounded and completely in their body, and the other person could be a total nutcase. So I feel like in so many cases, it's not about what you're doing, it's sort of about who's doing it.
Somebody said to me once,
is.
A client of mine that has a history of eating disorders said to me, said something. We were on the colonic table and we were talking about, she's very bloated and gassy, and I was talking to her about food combining things, and she said to me, and she's like in it, like she knows Gail and me, and she knows all of it. So, and she just said, I've known her for a long time. She's very comfortable with me. She goes, oh, don't talk to me about food combining, Mike. She goes, that just breeds eating disorders.
Isn't that interesting?
And I was like, it kind of doesn't, but I get what she's saying, because her therapist works with her on rules. Because she has too many rules around eating. So they break down the rules so she could be normal. Yes. But at the same time, food combining is just math, and it just exists on its own, and it's all about what we bring to it.
Yes, absolutely. And in defense of that, I will say that honestly, the reason why I am so sane and so grounded in a sort of very clean lifestyle at this point is because I went through that too. I had to throw away all of the detox principles and all of my rules because of the way that I was using them. It was all about I was never good enough. I was never clean enough. It was total insanity. And I threw it out the window, and I was like, food combining is crazy. This raw food thing is extreme. I mean, the same thing. This breeds eating disorders. This is extreme. This is excessive. And I had to go through this period of really believing that and really going all in, not necessarily saying fuck it, I'm not going to take care of my body, but really being in my body and seeing what that experience was like totally loving and accepting myself and just eating what I wanted. And then seeing oh, it's not the thing itself that's the eating disorder. It was who I was going through those things. And so I think that there's room for that. I think there's room to let it all go, but really stay in your body and be honest about what's working for you. And are you clear-headed? Are you waking up feeling good? Do you have the energy you want? Do you feel like yourself? Because that's the only reason for me for any of this, is because I feel more like myself when I take care of my body in a certain way. That's it. I'm just more me. And that's the only way that I will sell it to people, is you're going to feel more like yourself. You're not going to feel like you're trapped in your body, or you're constantly, hopping from coffee to sugar to this to that, because that's not freedom. That's not freedom at all.
Yeah. The dogma around the food stuff should only really be there if it serves you, right?
Yes.
Sometimes eating that Haagen-Dazs thing at 4:00 in the morning it might serve us well. Maybe we found out some terrible news that day and we just needed to fucking let it go.
I think there's a time for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I wouldn't do Haagen-Dazs at 2 a.m. I can't imagine, but I don't have to try to not.
Right.
So I'll wrap it up with that, talking about freedom, and that being the reason really for all of this, for me anyways. And my definition of a free spirit is you know, the sort of universal you, when you feel free to be completely yourself in your skin. No blocks physically, energetically, mentally, emotionally. How would you define free spiritedness or being free in your skin in your life?
Oh, wow. A free spirit is someone that knows themselves truly and lives from that, and gives zero fucks about other people's opinions of it. You know, I work on that all the time. Like I've done great with that. I'm about to go to my girlfriend's family's. This is our first holiday with her family. Her family's amazing, but I'm about to go there and Thanksgiving. And, you know, my future brother-in-law is already sending, you know, JP Sears videos on vegan Thanksgiving and like already starting to like fuck with me a little bit, you know, and it's just like, I'm about to go do that, but I feel no pressure. I'm just going to go. Like I told her mother, I was like, look, I'm a food weirdo, you know, like I do my thing. I've been doing it for 24 years. I don't, you know, I'm fine. You know, it's like, it's being totally comfortable to do your thing. And not really care about the judgments of anybody else. Because that's what fucks everybody up. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that. Do you know who he is? He's like a business coach guy that's kind of been really blowing up the last few.
Yeah, I don't really follow him.
Yeah, he does a lot of, I don't know if I want to call it motivational stuff, but he does a lot of stuff for entrepreneurs and stuff like that. And when you're an entrepreneur, you have to be free in the way that you think, because there's a lot of risk taking, a lot of putting yourself out there. So he's always giving me advice of like, you know, self-acceptance. And not caring about other people's opinions is a big thing, because a lot of people never get to do their thing or like leave their job or do their thing because of the opinion of their parents, because, you know, mom and dad wanted you to do this, or because, you know, it's going to upset my wife that I tried to do this. And I you know, whatever it is. And like, you find that a lot when like coaching these different people. So I find that a lot with nutrition and things. It's like, oh, well, I can't because my mom will, you know, like, she'll be upset that I whatever. And it's just like, fuck that. Like, if you want to be free and this is your thing, you do your thing and fuck all the rest of it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Lastly, I definitely want to plug your business. I'd love to hear all about the cryotherapy. I don't actually know much about cryotherapy. I'm curious, and I'm curious. I've been reading a lot about Wim Hof and playing with the Wim Hof method. And is cryotherapy anything like taking a cold shower? So that, and then I'd love to hear about the Colonics, why you would recommend them, and then tell us where you're at in real life and online.
Yeah, so so the new studio, I sold my old studio many years ago. I decided to open another one. We wanted a more central location. It's called Vitality NYC. We're on 35th Street in Manhattan. We're right behind the iconic Macy's Superstore. It's the biggest department store in the country. And so we're right in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. We do colon hydrotherapy. We do gravity colon hydrotherapy. All of the systems are custom built. We nerded out hard on them. I talked to all of my friends who are colonic therapists. Every angle is nerded out on. I mean, it's just, these are the best units we've ever worked with. This is the best.
Tell us why is gravity colon hydrotherapy why is it so important to look for gravity colon hydrotherapy as opposed to something else?
Well, now here's the thing. Every colonic therapist is going to tell you that their method is the best, and gravity is the best. But you know, you can get good colonics on other methods. I mean, I don't want to sound like all righteous on this, but with the gravity system and the way it's custom built and the way that we practice it, it allows the therapist to be more intuitive. So it's not methodical. We're not doing anything on a timer. We're not doing things because it's time to do that. We're not like going off of a checklist. You know, we do have all that in the back of our minds because we're all trained. But the moment we start a treatment, and it's always kind of difficult for me to teach new therapists this when I teach courses, because you sit down and the person's body is going to tell you what needs to happen, and I don't know what it is until that moment, and then you move with it. It's almost like trying to teach someone to play the drums. You could say like, well, this is this drum, and that's a cymbal, and that's a this, and here's your sticks. But to find that groove and that beat and flow with it, and like, you know, and work with the band, you know, like that's something the person has to develop to be good at it. So that's what we do. You know, one of the most common questions I get when I'm doing a treatment, and new therapists in training are watching me. They're like, why did you do that move? Or why did you decide to do this then? Or why did you touch them on that part of their abdomen? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. You know, it's like, it's one of those things. You know, it's one of those. So that's why I like Gravity. It's more intuitive. It gives us a lot of information about what the body wants in the moment. So we're not just, using machines and dials.
Right. That totally makes sense. Can anyone just walk off the street and say, I want a colonic, and then feel a lot better afterwards? Or does there need to be some sort of preparation to really make the most of it?
They do and they can, but if you really want to get your time's worth and your money's worth and get, value from the effort that you're putting in by showing up and doing it, there's ways to set up for treatments. One of the best ways is to do the Vitality Broom Cleanse. It's a cleanse that I developed, and it's basically the most ideal way to set up for a colonic, and it's a way of eating for 1 to 3 days before. It doesn't have to be like this epic thing where you're doing it for weeks before, but 1 to 3 days before, and it's basically based in hydration and broom foods. And broom foods are foods that have specific fiber contents, enzymes and acids that help break up waste and sweep it out of the tissue. So these are good to have them in your diet every day. And we also include fermented foods in the broom foods. So the Vitality Broom Cleanse, I think we're going to have that available soon right off the website. I mean, it's free to anybody that wants it. If anybody's listening to this and it's not available on the website, they can email Nick at hello@vitalitynewyorkcity.com and just say, hey, Nick, send me the broom cleanse, and he will send it right over to you guys.
And for people who have questions about, sweeping waste out of the intestine, who don't really believe that is true, you have a video on YouTube with the guy who invented the colonoscope. Do you recall the name of that video? Because we could just send people there.
It's podcast number 18. It's called The Truth on Poop. That's the long version. We have short version that's like 2 minutes that gets right to it. The longer version is cool, though. It's me talking a lot. And I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast one day, and he's a very influential podcaster, and I'm a fan. But when it comes to nutrition, he's not that bright. And he basically said, like, they were talking about like how cleanses were bullshit and how, you can't hold like excess pounds of waste in your intestine because you would die. And like, it was just, it was bro science basically. Right. So I was like, geez, this is so disappointing. So I made a response, one of my podcasts, I made a response to it. And if you listen to the podcast on iTunes, you won't see it, but if you watch it on YouTube, you'll see the colonoscopy footage of Dr. Hiromi Shinya. And it's fascinating. When someone gets a colonoscopy, they drink a preparation laxative. And the preparation laxatives are like the strongest laxatives you'll ever take. So you're going to take the biggest shit of your life. You take this stuff. And so people blow themselves all out, and then they get on the colonoscopy table, and with a camera, a device, they look up the backside, and they see what's happening. They see what the quality of the tissue is, and they see how much waste is retained in the body. And Dr. Shinya showed, the correlation between diet and disease. So like there's a lot of women with breast cancer, which is colons that have already had the laxative that are just smeared with waste. Mm-hmm. And when that waste sits there, it's not just like getting a piece of food stuck in your teeth. You know what I mean? Like when all those pockets of waste are sitting there and the walls are all, slimed, and you see the mucus webs and all this stuff happening, that's going to decompose. Your intestine is lined with bacteria. It's going to change the pH in the environment, and it's going to invite pathogenic bacteria. It's going to push out beneficial bacteria. It's going to interfere with digestion. And when that food, especially if it's of animal origin, which are the foods that tend to impact the intestines and slime the intestines, when that starts to happen, they decompose, and the waste gases are poisonous. So like when you ever see these college kids, lighting their farts on fire and making videos and putting it on YouTube, I mean, those are flammable gases that are bouncing around. So it's creating pressure. It's creating poisonous waste gases. It's inviting pathogenic bacteria, and eventually the tissue becomes inflamed, and then it could become ulcerated, and it could lead to all sorts of different diseases, diverticulitis. So, that's where it starts. Arnold Ehret, who we all kind of get our foundation from, who I talk a lot about in my podcast. I mean, he always says he would say, he was alive around the turn of the century, but he would say, that constipation is the root cause of all disease. And in some ways that's a little too radical, but in many ways that's true.
But people don't like to simplify it that much. We want things to be complicated.
Yeah. So once you, go ahead.
How does the broom cleanse help you actually begin to shift a lot of that out?
So what it starts to do is it starts to hydrate, and a lot of the all-stars of our room cleanse are like smoothies made with apples, pineapples. So there's different combinations of fibers there that will start to collect the waste away from the intestine. There's different enzymes, like in pineapple, the bromelain will help to break up a lot of the proteins. We have fermented vegetables in the salads, so that bacteria is now getting introduced and is starting to compete for space and break up waste along the intestinal wall. And you're starting the process of awakening. And we consider the food and the juices the soap and the colonic the shower.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, so that's how we set it up. You got to lather up before you come in. Yes. Otherwise, you'll still get a great treatment. It can be good, but once we get them on the room cleanse, it's incredible. And, sometimes when people don't prep, if they have a really bad diet, the treatments could be really uncomfortable. And then they never want to come back again because it wasn't a good experience.
Right. Which I think is why people have such bad colonic experiences in general, is because they have nothing, they haven't soaped up. Nothing's coming out.
Yeah. Because we do cryotherapy, we get people coming in all the time that are like, I want to do the colonic too, as if it's like, I'm going to get a pedi and a mani, it's like, no, I was like, you need some time before you do that. Like, you can jump in and off the street and get a cryo session. That's fine. You could do a sauna. You can get a massage. But, you don't want to jump on the colonic table unless you're a veteran and you know what you're doing.
Right. So what's the cryotherapy thing about?
So cryotherapy, again, I heard about it on the Joe Rogan podcast a number of years ago when I started doing it myself. And cryotherapy, it's very simple, basically. You're standing in a chamber that gets very cold, and you're only in it for 2 to 3 minutes. And it goes down, and the one at our studio we set to about negative 246 degrees. And there's nowhere on planet Earth that is that cold. Not even on Mount Everest does it get that cold. But you're only in it for a short amount of time. And you're basically standing there in your underwear. And when your body is exposed to a temperature like that very quickly, a number of different things start to happen. One of them, which I'm amazed everybody overlooks, it's the cleansing part of it. So we do this at the bathhouse a lot, where people will go, they expand, they get into the heat, everything opens, expands, and then they go into the cold plunge. And the entire cell structure of the body contracts in response to the cold, and it squeezes waste and gases out of the cell membranes for elimination. So it's a tremendous way to have a full body, sort of deep squeezing and exhalation of waste. So I've gotten sick from that, because all of a sudden you squeeze waste out into your system, and then now all of a sudden you're not feeling well. You're getting body ache, you're getting tired, you're getting congested because you have this stuff circulating. That's actually a good thing. We're eliminating waste from your cell structure. So when you stand in a cryotherapy chamber, that can happen as well. You can stand in there, and it's amazing. It reduces inflammation tremendously, because when you're in temperatures that cold, your cells will decrease the surface area of the membrane to conserve heat. And it pushes all that waste and gas out of the tissue. And then when you step out and everything, and the blood starts to flush back in, it's like, the feeling is tremendous. It feels so good. I've been in tremendous amounts of pain, physically, because I don't sleep well, and I'll stress out about stuff, running businesses and all this stuff. And I'll wake up with a headache and a twisted neck, and I'm really feeling it. And then I got to go do 6, 7 colonics that day, and I'm like, how am I going to get through this day? And I'll be like, all right, let me jump in the cryo chamber. 3 minutes later, it's 90% better, and then over the next hour, the other 10% is gone. Because it just drops the inflammation in your body so quickly. It releases a lot of anti-inflammatory compounds in the body. Like I had said, the cell structure decreases its surface area, squeezing away all that waste and gas. When you're in that temp, your body doesn't understand what's happening. Your mind does. Your mind's talking to whoever's there. Maybe you're talking to me. Maybe you're talking to Nick, or and they're like, oh, everything's fine. Oh, look at the clock. I got a minute and a half left. This is fine. But your body thinks that this is the new environment to adapt to. So it'll start adapting to that. And one of the ways it does that is it'll pull all the blood away from the extremities, which are the areas that we hurt the most. The knees, the ankles, the wrists, the elbows, shoulders, all that. And when it pulls the blood away, it pulls all that pressure and built up inflammation out. And then all the blood goes to the core over the course of that 3 minutes, and it starts circulating to all the vital organs to keep you alive and to keep them protected and to keep the core warm. And then 3 minutes later, you step out and your body's like, oh, wait, everything's fine. And then it flushes all the oxygenated, cleansed blood back into the extremities, and you're more flexible. I had a lot of people try to touch their toes up there, or some people can touch their toes, but I'll be like, let's see how deep down you can stretch. Try to touch your toes, or put your hands flat on the floor, and then they'll go do the cryo session. 3 minutes later, they go down, and it's 40 to 80% deeper than they could go. Yeah.
So do you think that you could get the same effect from an ice bath or a cold shower, but for a longer period of time, or is there just nothing that compares?
They say that 3 minutes they say each minute is equal to an hour in an ice bath. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I'll tell you this. I think you can probably get very similar results from ice baths and very cold showers. Water conducts its temperature. I think it's 20 times more effectively than air. So it's, 45-degree water is going to feel, well, let me just speak for myself. It feels 1,000 times worse than 3 minutes in negative 246 in a dry nitrogen-filled environment. So I remember one time it was wintertime and I had shaved, and my face was a little chapped up from shaving. So I was like, I'm going to run some really cold water on my face. And I put my face in front of the cold water, just cold coming in. I was in the shower, just coming in. And within 20 seconds, my skin started to sting and hurt. And I was like, ooh, I was like, this is really intense, but it doesn't get that way in the cryo chamber unless you stay in past 3 minutes. So yeah, it's a different, so can you get the same results? You could probably get similar results. It's going to be a much more intense experience you have to endure. But yeah, you can probably get very similar results.
And what would you say to somebody who's like, that's just extreme. The temperature's extreme. You shouldn't be putting water up your bum, all this stuff. It's extreme. It's unnatural.
Well, it is unnatural. All of it is unnatural. And it's just, the response, colon hydrotherapy is unnatural, but we're doing it in response to unnatural living.
Right.
Because if we were just still hunter-gatherers running around using our bodies, living in the sun, squatting all the time when we go to the bathroom, only eating things from the earth and hunting and I don't really think we'd have to worry about colonics too much. Everybody always likes to say, well, they've been doing it since as far back as Egyptian times. And it's like, yes, because that was a civilization built on agriculture. And as soon as we got into agriculture, we started eating refined starches and too much meat and started, using dairy products, and people started to pay attention. They were like, holy shit, we got to clean out because this is not a good thing,
Right.
I don't know of any hunter-gatherers that do that that have that kind of behavior, but it's therapeutic. We do a lot of things that are not, we do a lot of things. We've done some, humanity's done a lot of fucked up things. We've really destroyed a lot here, but we've also won in a lot of areas. Even stuff with food, people are like, well, these aren't the natural foods that we ate. Even people with the GMO argument. Sure. They say, oh, well, we've been genetically modifying food since the beginning. And it's like, well, no, we haven't. We've been just basically selective breeding, which is a totally different animal, but we won. We could be eating crab apples, or I could be eating Fuji apples. Right. It's like, are they higher in sugar? They don't seem to be shortening my lifespan. I think humanity, we won on that one. Yeah. And on a lot of the things that we do. And colon hydrotherapy is the same thing. It's like we figured out a drugless way to change the environment of our body and have an overall therapeutic systemic effect. Why is that? Who cares if it's natural?
Right.
That's great.
So it's just unnatural to the degree that we've become unnatural. It's extreme to the degree that our culture has become extreme in order to balance ourselves back out and come back to something of a natural state.
Yeah, most people that say, oh, it's unnatural to put water up your butt, it's also unnatural to get a triple bypass surgery.
Yeah, totally.
It's not stopping anybody.
Right. Right. And this is what we tend to see for this idea of, well, I should be able to eat whatever I want, do whatever I want. Yeah, sure. You absolutely can. But what part of you is saying that? Where is that coming from? And do we really want it to lead to this? Is that really inevitable? Clearly it's not.
Yeah. People want, basically when it comes down to what people want is they want to be able to do whatever they want and for everything to be okay.
Sure.
That's what we want.
But I always say that so I guide people through intuitive eating if they are coming from a background that I came from of just real intense extremes, not being able to, have any sort of nuance. Where was I going with that? What was I just saying a moment before that?
You're talking about your people coming from your background?
Oh yeah. Intuitive eating. Okay. And so this whole idea of just being able to eat whatever you want, I always say, well, who is the you who's talking? Is it the scared, wounded, can't be with their emotions you? Is it the you that's eaten nothing but sugar and processed foods their whole life? There's more underneath that. So yes, you can eat from that part of you, but ultimately it's not going to be very fulfilling because you're not very fulfilled now, which is why we're talking about this. So that's always an interesting, like, there's so much nuance. It's not all so straightforward.
I like how you said that. Like, is it the you that's wounded and feels like someone's taking something away from you, or is it the empowered you that's like, I can eat whatever the fuck I want, and I'm going to eat something that empowers my physiology?
Exactly. Are you rebelling in a way that actually empowers you, that actually feels good? Are you rebelling against culture and what culture says we should be eating, or what your family says you should be eating? Or are you just sort of rebelling against yourself and wounding yourself over and over and over again because it feels good for a moment? And that's valid. I think there are a lot of people, and to a certain degree in most of our lives, that's all that we know how to do. But, eventually we can learn to do more than that so that we don't have to live such painful lives. So,
Brandy, I was just reminded of something from what we had talked about earlier. You were asking me about just advice for people that are looking to eliminate food cravings and sort of escape that cycle. And I didn't think of this at the time, but, one of the things, Dr. Fred Bishy has done a lot of deep cleansing work, a lot of long fasts. I mean, he's fasted himself down to 88 pounds, I think, on water. He's done multiple fasts over 50 days on water. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff. And, he eats a very clean diet. He's been a raw food vegan for over 55 years. And when I mean raw food vegan, I mean like purist, And he would always say that, like, one of the things that helped him the most with food cravings and working through it and allowing his body to come back to its natural state and properly communicate to him was praying. He's very religious. I'm not very religious, but he's very religious. But just he always says having that personal relationship with God is tremendous for this, and like having faith in what you're doing, and just asking for assistance. And, and so, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, but, having a spiritual belief that I'm guided into certain things with intention, it's helped me a lot.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to explain that, but it helps a lot with like the physical food stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my take on that and how I tend to work with people is I say, so sometimes it feels like there are multiple people living in your heads. Like, there's the part of you that is like, damn it, I want the cookies right now. And there's the part of you that's like, you're really not going to feel good if you eat those cookies. Like, I think there's something more. And so for me, it's about getting to know both of those parts and being guided by the part of you that sees the bigger picture. Because I think that we all have that. We all have a part of us that we can set intentions through that will, whether you want to call it intuition or your higher self, or I don't know, it doesn't need to be fancy, but I just think it's all within us. You can even call it God if you want, but I still think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And briefly, when you talk about eating clean, that can be something that people can get really freaked out about. And they'll say like, oh, clean is not a thing, or it'll be like the paleo thing and people are hashtagging eat clean. When you say clean, you're not just saying clean as like I'm morally better than you. You literally mean clean as in food moves through your body without leaving anything behind to block you from being fully yourself. Yes?
Oh yeah, and I don't have any moral judgments on the clean thing. No, almost everybody I work with are still eating animal protein and stuff, and like so here's how I think about clean food. This is one way people can think about clean food, and here's the thing. Okay, so here's a definition that I've created for clean eating. So when we're trying to evaluate if this ingredient is good, or if this dish is good, or if this like food is really a health food, there's 3 criteria. So the first one is what everybody knows, and that's nutrient content. So like that's what the whole superfood thing is. It's like, you want antioxidants and trace minerals and vitamins and phytochemicals. Like we want all these different really cool nerdy things with our food. So like we want that. We want it to be grown in like volcanic ash soil and biodynamic farmed, and like yes, like that's the first part of it. But actually that's an important part of it, but it's really only a third of what qualifies a food to be healthy or not. So first part is nutrient content. We want a food that delivers good nutrition. The second part of it is we want a food that acts like a cleanser. So it's about what a food can remove. So an apple a day keeps the doctor away because it makes you shit. It's not so much about the vitamin C and all that. That plays a small role, but it's because the fibers in apple will sweep through the intestine, they'll absorb waste, they'll carry things out, and yes, they'll deliver all that goodness too. And then they leave completely, which is the third part and the other side of that coin. So it's what a food removes and what a food doesn't leave behind. So we could talk about eating clean, and we could talk about grass-fed beef. And grass-fed beef has like omega-3 fats in it. It's probably loaded with minerals. It's got a lot of protein in it. If it's done right, it doesn't have any pesticide residues, pollution, or antibiotics in it. So it's a clean meat. But is it really a clean food? Mm-hmm. Because if you just eat a big bowl of steak, what's going to happen is it's going to deliver stuff into the bloodstream. It's not going to pull anything away from the tissue. And people are probably wondering, like, what needs to get pulled away from the tissue? Maybe I'm not explaining it right. But what needs to get pulled away is either old food residues or, if we've been eating clean, it's just metabolic waste. So we have thousands and thousands of bacteria and dead cells that are constantly getting deposited into the intestine, and they need to get swept out. We need to keep that stuff moving. Otherwise, we have all this dead bacteria and we have all this dead flesh, from our own bodies. Metabolic waste. Right. Gets released, excess cholesterol. Cheerios will lower cholesterol, and people are like, well, wow, Cheerios are healthy. Well, they have a type of fiber in them that'll absorb cholesterol and pull it out of the body. So that's what I mean by pull things away. So if we eat a bowl of steak, the steak's not going to pull any cholesterol away. It's not going to pull any dead tissue away. It's not going to pull any dead bacteria out of our body, and it could potentially leave behind a trail of sludge. Mm-hmm. And dairy products do it tremendously, but an animal food does too. No animal food really has any fiber. So those foods need to be balanced. So a true clean food is something that delivers nutrition, pulls waste away from the tissue, and doesn't leave anything behind. Mm. So we want to make our diet somewhere between 80 to 100% of that to get results. So a raw foodist is probably going to be 100% of that. Vegans that don't eat processed food and fake crap, they're probably going to be close to 100% of that. Someone that eats a little bit of animal protein, and they're eating like clean meat, like grass-fed beef and chicken or fish or like whatever they consider their clean animal protein. If they're eating raw salads and drinking raw smoothies and drinking water and drinking raw juices and eating fruits, and they're making sure to eat some steamed vegetables and salads with whatever little bit of high-quality animal protein they eat, they're in a good zone. They're going to get results because they're sneaking it in. They're sneaking in the food that needs to get balanced. Mm-hmm. Most Americans don't do that, though. They just eat all refined carbs and meat, very little cleansing food or clean food, and then they get all junked up.
Right.
So those three criteria are very important for people to think about. Like, looking at this thing, is soy milk good for me? Is this thing good for me? Is that good? Mm-hmm. Like, well, does it meet that three criteria? Then maybe you either shouldn't have it or you shouldn't have so much of it, and make sure you're doing it surrounded by a lot of clean eating.
Right. It's so simple. And you are the first person I feel like who I heard simplify it in that way. And I just appreciated it so much because this information really it's not widespread. And I feel like you have been able to make it cool and easy to understand and like fresh and fun and not, it's nobody needs to sit down and read Arnold Ehret now unless they feel really inspired to. Like it's just, you sum it up so beautifully. So if people want to...
I like that. I like the simplicity of it.
Yeah. And all of this, it is so simple. And I think it takes time for people to wrap their minds around it because we're so used to things being so complicated. But it really is so simple. And if people want to hear more from you, what is your YouTube channel? And is that your primary place for people to find you right now in the online world?
Right now it is. I took the website down. That website, well, you can find the YouTube channel through this URL. It's everydaydetox.org. Right now, that's going to take you to YouTube. So hopefully by the time this podcast airs, I'll have my podcast back on iTunes and Everyday Detox as well. It's basically Everyday Detox everywhere.
Beautiful. Okay. Not to be confused with the Everyday Detox tea.
No, and those guys. It's funny. Somebody just gave me a box of those because it's Everyday Detox, and I use that. Yeah. And I've been drinking it all week. It doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, no, I know. Great marketing, though.
Great marketing. They actually, they challenge a lot of my trademark requests, which is strange because it's for like non-related things. But not to be confused with Everyday Detox Tea. And also there's somebody that came out with a book, and their book is at like everydaydetox.com. So they wrote a book called Everyday Detox. So
yeah, I do think I know that one.
That's not me either. I've had people write me and they're like, I got your book. And I'm like, impossible. I've never written a book. I'm like, so that's somebody else. And I don't know if that book is good or not, but maybe
you do have ebooks, am I right? Or a fermented foods book?
I do. I get really nerdy on fermented vegetables. So I took that That's not online anymore. But yeah, I wrote a whole book on fermentation. It's a fantastic book. But I do a lot of giveaways and stuff, and I send it out to people. So, and everybody that comes through Vitality gets a copy of that book anyway.
Oh, awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly, incredibly informative, and I really appreciate having you.
Thank you. I love chatting with you about all this stuff.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Before I wrap things up, I want to invite you to come join the private Free Spirit Academy Facebook group, where I post videos, offer support, and answer questions on all things food and body freedom. And you'll also get a free copy of my ebook, The Eat to Feel Good Diet. I hope to see you there.